identity isn't a monolith. So just because I'm black and I live in Ireland, I might not necessarily share the same experiences with other people. And I think when you kind of break that down and look into it a bit more, it opens up a bunch of different and interesting more questions. So for me, it informs my art work heavily. I'm currently doing a photo project called Trips Back Home. And that's just kind of, I guess, the connection with myself, where I'm based, where I plant my feet, and also my heritage and the culture back in Nigeria. I lived in Nigeria maybe from the ages of, I don't know, 3 to 6, and kind of just revisiting as often as I can, seeing family, seeing, having those memories and kind of, I don't like using the word like sensory overload because I feel like I don't know what that means, but I remember when I went back last and I started documenting, those kind of senses were quite heightened in a sense. So I think my culture, my heritage, my background, all informs my work and it makes it more kind of honest, because these are things that I hold dear to me, so therefore I'm more interested in documenting them.
Yeah. Do you actually feel a responsibility to do that?
Yeah, because for me, I want my work to be authentic. I want to be able to speak passionately, and I also kind of want to learn more and go on this journey of, trying to discover how I identify. Because depending on who you ask me, sometimes, my answer might be different. It's like people ask you where you're from, and it's like, more than likely I'd say Nigeria, because I feel like that's what they're asking, But ultimately, if I was to be asked by maybe like a black person that I know or a friend, I'd say Belfast, because that's the city that raised me in a sense. So it's kind of just trying to discover that sense of belonging and identity and trying to understand that there and what do I class to myself as, culture. When I've grown up here, I've enjoyed my life, but I still kind of hold dear to my Nigerian side, and I'm also more kind of perceived as a Nigerian,
Yeah. And you actually recently won the African Irish residency here in the Photo Museum. Do you want to tell us a wee bit about that and how it supported you and maybe your career development?
Yeah, so far it's been great. We exhibited in July. It was amazing to come down here for the first time. I've never been in the Photo Museum Island before. So that was great to meet everyone and all the staff. So the residency itself begins, I think it's just began. So every, I think once or twice a month, I'll be coming down here to kind of showcase work, kind of gain advice, different kind of processes and understanding, I guess, how to best navigate and approach my work in the art world. They're giving us access to a lot of things, and I'm just kind of super excited to, start.
Okay, good. Do you think, or do you have barriers that you face as a black artist as opposed to a white one?
I think there are barriers. I don't know if I'll be able to name any specifics, but growing up in Belfast, I'm still yet to kind of exhibit any work, and I love the kind of the programs and resources we seek out are all kind of government funded, which is kind of standard. I'm yet to have many luck in some cases, but I've had no issue kind of exhibiting work in more, let me say, diverse cities. There are more initiatives. I've exhibited work in Nottingham and more recently Dublin. I've exhibited work in Dublin a couple of times actually. So I don't know. I always like to perceive Belfast as kind of always behind and late to the party in a sense, and that's no fault of its own. It's less diverse, and I think with more diversity that informs and kind of forces the hand to kind of create these initiatives and inspire these initiatives. And I think with more growth and more kind of, I guess, artists in a sense, like myself, there'll be that kind of desire to enforce more diverse work and also perhaps kind of bring it in earlier at an educational stage, perhaps.
Okay. And I think that's a fair enough response to that. We are increasingly becoming a bit more diverse, but it is really quite slow. And we're still very much a white community, as the recent riots would express that. But within your experience, what do you think is missing in terms of diversity?
I think it's just diverse, artists from a diverse background, and that's not necessarily race. I think more artists from a diverse background, people from more underrepresented communities, the they need to, it's not a case of we need to find opportunities. I think opportunities need to come also kind of, not opportunities, but initiatives also need to come and find us in a sense, you know. That's why I kind of mentioned like the educational process, because when I studied in high school and yeah, in secondary school, art was always kind of about, I guess, painting, and that's fine. But I would have never known that, you know, photography could kind of be a path, you know. I never known that, you know, documentary filmmaking could be a path, and I feel like these, you know, different types of artworks, or art forms, I should say, should be kind of implemented younger, at the earlier educational stage, because then kids from diverse backgrounds and people from underrepresented groups kind of see it earlier, and then that might motivate them to, you know, pursue that path.
What do you think, artists like yourself, the role that they play in broadening marginalised communities, and then concept and the ideas that you were discussing there?
Yeah, I think it's very important. That's why partially a lot of my work focuses on, you know, those themes that I mentioned earlier, because I think if somebody from an underrepresented group, you know, sees the way I approach my work, they might want to approach their work in a, you know, similar manner, you know, where they kind of document their surroundings, their backgrounds, the life they live, and, you know, what's happening and ongoing in their community.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to take a minute, if you're ready for it. She's decided she's going to have a battle with me up here, but I think I'm going to, okay, let's go. Your exhibition, Unusual Gestures, is deeply personal. Yet it does have really universal themes of family, neurodiversity, and disability. So how do you, as an artist, balance your personal experience and as a mother with a broader advocacy for public understanding of autism and intellectual disability?
So, as a mother and a mother of 4 children and 2 boys and 2 girls, and both of the boys have autism, and one is coupled with a profound intellectual disability and a lot of comorbidities. I'm also hugely involved as a parent, without choice, to be an advocate and an activist. I think a lot of parents set out on their road with their children without intent in that area, but somehow you're drawn in. And I'm heavily involved in the primary school and secondary school that my children attend. I've become the chairperson of the 2nd largest special school for children with profound disabilities of a parents' association. Again, and I meet families, I meet children, I meet lots of different people all the time from lots of different backgrounds, advocating on behalf of their children. So I suppose I'm exposed really to lots of different people, particularly as we are in a minority. Children with profound intellectual disabilities are still in the minority. And when we talk about neurodiversity, there's so many strands and so many levels and layers, and it's so complex that I don't think we'll ever be able to really get down to the nitty-gritty and peel back what we, you know, how we need to focus on discussing disability and neurodiversity. So for me, as a mother and becoming an activist, I think I've been described as an activist, I've made work around my family and used my lived experience with what I see every day with my children.
Okay. Well, how do you see photography having to shape social perceptions of neurodiversity?
It's interesting because it's education, and we've never been more educated. I mean, we've got such a hugely educated society now. Everyone is got a way into education. It doesn't matter really where you come from. You will get there if you want to try badly enough. And yet, somehow, we have become slightly separated all the time because everyone is hungry to learn about disability, neurodiversity, and photography is only one small little way that you can try to connect with people. You will maybe connect with one person out of 40, trying to display an idea or a story. I find that that's okay, because until you're there, you don't know. So to the viewer, be whatever that may be, I'm happy for whatever a person wants to take from looking at my work about my family, that they may learn something or may not. I'm not sure if I'm able to describe that as well
That's
as.
okay. But maybe, have you noticed any shifts in your work? As you see, like different kind of audiences, because, you know, someone likes experimental practice, and so, as you mentioned, there has an educational role. Have you seen any shifts with the more recently?
Pass it around. Actually, shifts in fine art practice. I've looked at other photographers' work in, you know, in making work about disabled persons or persons who are diverse. I'd take an example, Eugene Smith's hugely impressionistic person in my life, 70s. He depicted an environmental disaster in Minamata in the 70s. Now, that probably doesn't maybe make a connection for somebody here who's thinking about neurodiversity at a broader level, but I often wonder, does there have to be an environmental disaster for people to understand disability versus neurodiversity versus the whole problem in the world of trying to make connections and trying to make people understand what people have to go through in order to say what they need to say. So in my case, or in my children's case, I took my lived experience discussing family, the big picture of family, which again doesn't come near an environmental disaster, but sometimes almost there has to be something huge, a huge disaster in order for people to wake up and listen. So the more, I suppose, I find it very hard to find other artists like me making work about family and disability. So.
I know, I suppose, in a sense, and maybe in this case all the time, but just interested in your perspective, you know, like photography can be used as a platform to foster empathy and create inclusive dialogues. We do it through a lot through our archive, because we feel that photography really opens doors. You know, it's easy, it's accessible. Like everybody has an iPhone, everybody takes photos, stamps, selfies, whatever. So it's a lot more accessible than a lot of the other visual arts. But is that what you're trying to do within your work, or do you think photography can and can't do that?
Empathy. Everyone's using that word, isn't it? Empathy, accessibility, inclusivity. I mean, I find I'm looking at United Nations charters. As parents, we end up looking at charters. There's 50 articles in the United Nations Persons for the Rights of Disability for Children. There's 50 articles, and there's, like, you know, if you want to draw down 6, 7, and 8 are the best to read. Tick the box for accessibility. We all have to become accessible, and empathy in terms of how we are, you know, with our thinking in terms of discussion about disability and neurodiversity. Everyone's trying to be super careful. Empathy, does anyone have empathy?
Yeah.
I was on the train from Galway this morning, and I got up to let a woman sit down, and she had to pass about 10 chairs in order. She had her arm was in a sling, and no one got up. Even though, so there's your 1 in 40. There's your 1 in 40 was empathy. So I will always be easy on people. I think we have to be easy on each other. So is that empathy? That we cannot truly understand what everyone goes through. And so in the world of neurodiversity, you talk about disability, it's so huge. Having empathy is key, but if you get through to one person, it's good. It doesn't mean you have empathy, but
It's good.
it's good.
It's good. And just both of you now, and have you had any sort of personal challenges and breakthroughs? But have you ever had a moment within your practice you went, oh my God, thank God I done that. That really needed to happen. I've seen it have affected change. Or perceptions.
I think so. Last year I done a project for Bernardos, the children's charity, and it was an ethnography project that kind of focused on different branches of groups that they would work with. So whether it was their possibilities department, which is like kids with disabilities, or their young carers, or working with refugees or asylum seekers. The project was essentially give them all disposable cameras. I think there's about 68 children in total, like young people. So kind of document what home and life in Dublin and kind of how they portray that or how they can convey, life in Dublin to them. And it was a platform for them to share their stories. We had a lot of industry people at the conferences and the exhibitions hosted. They got to create a photo book with all these images, which they were able to take, and loads of people got them to sign it as well. And just kind of working with, I guess, young people and children from different backgrounds and seeing them collaborate and seeing them document life was quite rewarding to me on a selfish level, but seeing them kind of engage with the arts and seeing how much it meant to them was also rewarding as a whole. And I think that's kind of, I guess, the power of what we pursue as artists. We want to we kind of have this idea of implementing change or conveying stories that will be impactful one way or another. So just kind of doing a project that may not have, I don't know, great significance on a large scale, but locally and to those people in the particular project, it was very meaningful. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, it does. You have anything to say? No?
Making work over the last few years and having Photo Museum Ireland produce and commission the work and the production of my show for Photo Museum Ireland of Unusual Gestures is probably a huge milestone in terms of my work. And again, with whether or not the message is received or not, it doesn't matter, as long as it receives attention and maybe has longevity in terms of connecting with families or not, or large groups. For me, that was a
Thank you. And I think institutions can be more inclusive and accessible, but not in a tokenistic way. And I suppose, especially in the representation of diversity or ethnicity or whatever it happens to be, how can you do better at it?
For me, I think, I don't know, my ideas of improvement are potentially unrealistic and very time consuming. I feel like there has to be a personable approach. I think there has to be, meetings with the artists, discussions that are grander than just, what they are applying for in a sense. Because like a lot of the application processes within Belfast would be like, for example, the Arts Council, and I've been rejected for a number of like silly reasons, like I forgot to title one of the documents I attached, even though I've attached like 20 different documents. And there's like, I feel like if there were, if part of the process, application process was to be like, an in-person meeting, and there's a personable approach to it, and the meeting's more significant than just what you're applying for. It gives them a better understanding of you as an artist, your approach, your kind of positioning of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve. And not just for yourself as an artist, but also for the community that potentially the project might serve. I think that would be another good approach, but also I do understand that meeting every artist that's applying for funding would be, yeah, but yeah, I don't necessarily know because I don't think too well about those things. You know, once I get a rejection, you know, I'm just
But I
looking next
suppose
place.
I could interject there, you know, as a previous funder myself, 300 applications as a general rule every year.
Yeah.
Every funding round. So, and whilst, you know, I think funders do try and make it, you can't see everyone. But I do know your frustration about simple little things like numbering, you know, that is eliminating people. In some ways it's funny, you're going, at least don't have to reject one. You know, unless I have to reject, so it keeps it fair and it keeps it equal. But I do think even galleries, I think have to think how they can better do that in relation to artists as well. I think the survey that the museum are doing, I think it's really important because it's at least it's asking the question. And it's, you know, it's very hard to know all the time the right way forward. And that's why consultation, I think, is so important.
The tokenism piece though, just quickly, obviously, how do you know when someone is being honest and integrity in the, you know, with their work, that there is honesty when you've got 200 applications? So how do you weed that out? And then if it's really,
I think you look at your background, you look at your track record, you look at what you've done before. You get to know the artist as well. If, you know, Northern Ireland is relatively small in that sense, so you do start to pick up on it. But so you look at what they've done before, you look at what they're proposing to do, but you have to take risks, and if we do take risks, you have to trust people. If they say it, you have to accept that. Otherwise, you'll never give anybody any money. Because, you know, it's one of those things, you have to accept what they put in the application is a choice, and if it's backed up, better, if it's backed up by evidence, that's good. That's all you can do. Okay, I'm just gonna throw this out to the floor. Anybody would like to ask any questions?
So I don't know if you have to think about like cameras as an extension of where you're moving, as the children are lower down. So I don't know, do you have any memories of
In terms of how I guess they were super fun. I'm trying to think specifically to your question. How did they document? A lot of them documented and focused on family, what they do for fun, kind of what's their happy place, you know, because some of them kind of had like I guess challenging upbringings in a sense. But in terms of how they perceive, because like you said, they're quite lower down. I don't think I took note of that, to be honest. But it might be something I have to look through. We made a book as well, so it might be something I have to look through and see if that's, you know, clear or not. Because some of the children and some of the young people, so I think the eldest was maybe, I don't know, 19, 20. But no, that's interesting. Sorry I couldn't, I guess, answer your question specifically.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes?
Can I just ask, Lorraine, your project there, did you notice a difference in how maybe you or your family were treated before rather than after? Like, was it worth doing? Did you feel like it did draw attention or provide sort of a point of discussion?
it might make managers more disability. Disability is a very, very strange place, to be quite honest, and you know, it's bananas. But most people know me, and outside of that, the reaction has been very positive. And we post showing here at Ocean Museum and Galway International Arts Festival, Letterkenny, Roscommon, my phone, and I'm not joking, every day there was probably 10, 20, 30 little messages, one-liners from a parent, just thank you. So, you know, that's a good day. And I often get requests from somebody, would you like to have a coffee or meet up? And that's fine. Or they would turn up during the show, and you might be there, and you end up in a really great conversation. So post, I take things in my stride as well, and people, will react. You're never going to please everybody with body work about autism, disability, complex needs, because it's huge. So how to do that is the impossible. So really positive and ongoing, and we want to continue making work in this area, and it'll shift as the kids get older. And man is the guy who's youngest, who has the most complex needs. It's really interesting because Sean is older. He is 15 now, and he is more, he's mild, but his needs are as great as the youngest, who's more complex, because he's a more hidden. That could be very, it's sinister in its own way, because it's not obvious. So, the guys that hit all the buttons and you can see all the things that are wrong, it's nearly easier to kind of look after us in a strange way. I might be going off the beat track, but we have a very happy home life as well. And that is a big recipe for positivity. I'm always happy. That helps, and there's a lot going on. That doesn't mean it's the same for somebody else.
We can possibly speak as a venue, because we were, you were here all the time. It makes a huge difference in terms of addressing the issues of diversity, equality, inclusion, just to make things visible, and that's what photography does, simplest level. So regardless of what you're working with, the amount of audience that you gave to us, and I'm just so glad to have something made visible. I think it does.
And Uncle Owen,
Yeah.
amazing.
Moments here.
Amazing person. And that night, culture night last year, where Uncle Owen came out in his bridal pearl dress.
Is green, uncle's gender fluid,
Yes.
man with Down syndrome.
And, my WhatsApp is going 90. I can even hear it in the back there. I think, I grew up with my uncle as a child. We're almost the same age, Runkle. And to us, he was always who he is now. Playing Here Comes the Bride, and going up and down Granny stairs, and she was always roaring at us to come down out of her wardrobe, because I was dressing in his granddad's suit, and Owen was in his mom's nanny's old wedding dress, and curtains going, and makeup, and whatever he could rob or steal of us, and that to us was our normal. So to make that with Uncle Owen was just, to be honest, it was really fun and really good and really positive. And he is a she, because he describes himself as pink when he wants to be a woman today. And he's actually, his life is even better because of the exhibition. He's being recognised when he goes to, we were walking across the bridge here to come over after the culture night, to come back over for something, and people were stopping him on the bridge, in all his gorgeous glory and his beautiful dress, and that's magic. You can't buy that. It's just amazing. Yeah.
My question is there any space or place for the Ministry of Education to be working in bringing works that are making the invisible visible, and actually getting it to schools, into communities, because I think there's so much amazing work being made, but it's not getting down to grassroots level.
With Norman Foley, Minister Norman Foley.
With anybody in the Ministry of Education, together with the Department of Culture, is there a gap in the making and creating of work, and then the getting it?
It's really interesting, because somebody asked me from Arts Council, where, how, who, nobody knows what to bloody do. Yeah. And that's all right, to be honest, and say we don't know how to go about these things. And getting it, it's Barbaro, I don't know, does anyone know Barbaro? It's a children's arts festival that happens every October in Galway. It's quite significant. So they have now decided, as an example, to go into where my son attends, Brother Charity-led, Department of Education-led, it's a multidisciplinary-led school. So there's all sorts of fingers in the pie there. It's crazy, really, when you're trying to deal with it all. But they're getting into the school now, because we cannot take 20 buses for 4 kids per bus down to Babro, and the stairs is 2 miles long. And some of them are non-ambulant and may have, oxygen or peg fed, and they're not, and all sorts of different needs where they may need medications every hour. So the Babro are now deciding to go into the school next week and do a whole series of shows over a week. And so that is the way. But then it's easier to say, because the amount of paperwork for them to get in there was phenomenal, GDPR piece, but they're in. And it's a huge move forward, because the first time, so I don't know if anyone knows Babro, again, bringing it to the children who will never get to go. And you're even, that Department of Education piece, again, trying to get into schools to do, I'm speaking on Thursday to some children in a school in Clifton, and that's another way to do it. But again, not everyone is always going to be happy with that. Not every parent wants their children to learn about, it's amazing how you have to be very, very careful as well. And there's a lot of red tape sometimes just popping into a school, and the Department of Education can't even deal with what's coming down the tracks at them, because teachers have a horrible job now. They're expected to pick up everything and know everything, and they can't. They don't have enough help as it is, so there's lots of layers there.
I guess thinking about both the issues your work is addressing, and also in displaying the work, we talk about how effective it can be to do something in certain places, whether that's say a gallery or in an educational program, and then you're also an artist or a photographer that is taking your own view, your own approach to commit to a body of work. Are sometimes those things, do they support each other? Can there be intention? Are you thinking, if I did this or showed this, would it be more effective here? Or that kind of balance between knowing what you're trying to achieve to create your work, or knowing what you want your work to achieve later? So maybe a meta question, but yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I still like to think that I'm still kind of very early stage artist. So at the moment, I kind of just prioritize the idea and the conception of the work. And maybe naive of me, but I try not to think about, where the work might go or where it's best suited to go, I just want to create work for creation's sake because it brings me joy. I'm still very new to exhibiting my work in, galleries and whatnot. I've only had maybe four exhibitions, one in Nottingham, 2 in Dublin, maybe 3 exhibitions. But yeah, it's still a lot I need to learn and figure out, and that's even in part why I'm excited for the residency here, because it's something I think artists should think about, the effects of their work. I don't think necessarily you should make work for making work's sake. I feel like you should make work with that intention in mind. So it's definitely something that I need to start thinking about and apply to my work and my progress and my process.
I can tell you, for me, because I'm married to a farmer, and that leaves me in, pecking order for rolling jobs. The intention is just to make pictures all of the time. So, the camera is just always knocking around. I'm not too precious about the chassis of anything anymore, since I have 4 kids and not a home. So the work has evolved by just making it, and I am not very organised. So I just take the camera and make pictures, and the outcome measures, personal outcome measures were never hugely forefront of my head. That came by coming to the guys here in Museum of Ireland with the work, and then work. The intention is just making it, because you can't stop yourself, you just do it.
And do you have to answer your question?
Thanks, I'm so grateful to the both of you for being so real. And can I pick up on Tolly's piece on diversity? You're bang on that. You need to go and talk to the communities and you know, when you're filling out the form, if you can't talk the talk, like you're never going to get in. And if the funders are funding people who have exhibited before, there's a ban of regulars only on that, you know. And now, I'm not someone who's been looking for funding and been rejected yet. I'm just kind of still about to knock on the door. So I'm so grateful that the Irish Photo Letter have opened these doors. So this kind of, to me, is a kind of a holy, sacred place that's posh, and am I even allowed in? If you get me? So I just appreciate that you're saying it is important to actually, if you're not naturally coming from a community of speaking appropriately for these applications and these panels, that, you know, that there is humans that are here. It's beautiful. So thank you all.
And that's also something that people want to hand with applications, you know, that is there, because there's always a jargon with any industry. There's always words that use again and again. And one of the reasons we did the residency for Black Irish artists was the Arts Council that surveyed access to the arts, and the one group that faced the most barriers to access was Black Irish artists, and that's why I thought we have to do something like that. But we're only at the start of being more accessible. We're putting a lot of, and Lorraine is one of our advisors, so we're literally year one. So and the feedback from artists like Lorraine and like Tully that will help us do better, because we've all got to cut down the jargon, make ways to really be accessible, find other ways into the arts, because the role of the arts is to respect society, and if it's just the same people again and again and again, it's difficult. Our main difficulty for all our spaces is lack of physical space to show enough artists. That's always a restriction for us, you know. And I think one thing that might help is more support for open book publishing. You know, we're looking to be funded by the Arts Council, but artists' exhibitions tend to be quite transient. When they're on, they're over. But publishing a photo book is a way to reach much wider audiences and have something that people can engage with. So I think if there's one thing that we could do, it would be develop, you know, strategy. But I think we just need to open up the community and get artists to share their experience, because they're the best people who know how to apply for funding. But the main thing is to keep going. We applied for funding and see we're 60% successful in our applications. Everybody's applying for funding. We all get rejection. The main difference between the people who make it and the people who don't is just belligerence and persistence. So, you know, just keep going. Yeah, keep going.
Okay, I think that's going to wrap it up. I'd just like to say thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, welcome to our second panel, which is Challenges for the Future, Artists and AI. It's going to be moderated by Jose Neves, who is curator at Madness Exposed, which we said earlier. Yeah, all good. Formerly senior lecturer in photography at University of Northampton and Ulster University, but I let them introduce themselves a bit more. Also joined by Susan Levy, who is assistant professor in the School of Information and Communications at UCD, and Savannah Dodd, who's the founder and director of the Photoetic Centre. So I don't think Jose now to.
So thank you so much. This is going to be a really, I think, interesting panel and debate. It's such a complex topic, and we will not be able to cover everything. We've discussed that; it's impossible. I think we will focus on the ethical aspects linked to AI. We can, when we open to questions, maybe discuss the aesthetics and potentially the making of the images. But I think with Susan and Savannah, we will focus more on ideas of labor, the environmental impact of production of AI images, and copyright ownership and things like that have to do with those aspects, because they worked on those aspects in photography and AI in particular. So I would just like to start by asking you to introduce yourselves. I'll start with you.
Hi everyone. Susan Levy, Assistant Professor at School of Information and Communication in UCD. So my research area would be AI. I first did AI literally in the last century, 1999. So quite a cross-disciplinary career. Like my primary degree would be humanities. So I come at this very cross-disciplinary and more getting into AI ethics and digital policy. With, on a national level, and then I'm Ireland's nominee on Global Partnership for AI. So, kind of issues of copyright and all of those kind of things are very important.
Thanks very much, and thank you for having me.
Everything is on. Mine is on.
Okay, hello. Thanks very much for having me. My name is Savannah Dodd, and I am an anthropologist and photographer, and I'm the founder and director of the Photography Ethics Center. And yeah, I'm really excited to be part of this discussion. I think ethics and AI, there's so much we can talk about, especially when it comes to visual media. So, thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'd like to start with you because you're very invested in this idea of developing ethical literacy. And how do you think that can be applied to this discussion around artificial intelligence or machine learning or machine intelligence? There are many ways of describing this. Do you think there is a separation between those things? Because when you think about AI and how it is creating a visual ecosystem and inevitably contributing to the one that already exists, but obviously AI is trained with images that already exist. So, and is the bias that we're going to discuss today already obviously embedded in what exists and it's just being transferred to this new dimension, or do you think there's a difference? And ethically, do we need to learn new things, or do we just need to go back and sort of change what we've already established?
That's a big question. I mean, I think the idea of ethical literacy really, the way I view ethics, I think in visual media is really all-encompassing. It's sort of every stage in the process. From what are we choosing to photograph? What are we choosing to document? How are we doing that? And sort of everything from image creation to image dissemination. And I think when it comes to AI, absolutely, I think that's a specialization of yours as well, is sort of the biases built into these AI systems. And I think what we've seen a lot is that these AI models are learning from the images that already exist. But that body of images is created from a very predominantly white male gaze. So then the images that are resulting from, when you're informing the AI model with that, then it replicates that gaze and it replicates a lot of stereotypes. So I actually think that the sort of increased use of AI images really invites us to look back at our role as photographers and the role that we can play in expanding the data set of images that exist from a multitude of perspectives and a multitude of ideas and ways of being that can be represented. Does that answer your question?
No, it does. Yeah, it's very good. Susan, do you think, well, we're talking about this now, but one of the aspects in your research that I found really interesting is this idea that the general perception of AI is that it is neutral. Does that reflect when you research AI, do you think it is neutral, or there is a neutrality in it or not?
Yeah, no, there's no neutrality. I think that was at a time of big data era, where there's loads of data on the internet. If you've got enough data, and you'd have, the ultimate truth. You'd have objective reality. You don't need to sample. You don't need to consider what's in your data. You have enough of it. You have everything. And then I think by now we know that's not true. No matter what, how much data you have is from a viewpoint. And these models they take the internet, basically. So whatever is on the internet is what these are trained on, which is highly skewed. Yeah, so it isn't objective at all.
But you feel that because you've been researching this subject for a while, has it been changing gradually? What has been changing in the last, say, few years?
What's been
What is being done to also combat that bias?
Well, there's technical techniques being developed to mitigate that bias. But there's only so far you can go, no matter what you produce, no matter what data set it has, it has a standpoint. Like, I don't know whether it is impossible, as far as I'm concerned, to have anything that's objective. But what's changed is the regulation. So there's a lot going on, the AI Act and California as well, in particular. There's an awful lot of regulation coming out about bias and discrimination and stereotyping. How to implement that is another question. But it's certainly around 2016 that research started being done, and then since then there was more awareness, and now we're seeing regulation.
While preparing for this talk, and I was reading artists that, they're writing on the use of AI in their own practice. And I think one of the things that struck me as really interesting is that many of them argue that artists have the responsibility to go beyond the artistic practice, and because AI is also embedded in everything, that the role of an artist is to engage with this issue in a wider context. And I thought that very interesting. I know that we don't have an artist here, but there are several in the audience, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this. And I found it really interesting also looking at this issue historically. As a photo historian, when I was reading about all this, I thought, oh, here we go again. We go back to 19th century debates around what is art and what is not art, painting versus photography. And now photography, in a sense, is suffering the same fate that painting suffered back then. It's being, faced with this new thing that is going to destroy it, in a sense. So that's really interesting. And I think there's a division between, and we talked about that it depends on the circulation of these images and where they are. So and I know that the panel is about, in a wider sense, AI and arts. But we did talk about, and you asked me that question, I found that really interesting. What will be the impact of AI on actual practitioners when they, photographers, especially in terms of their jobs? And as a lecturer, as I said, I had that experience of working with students and showing them how to use AI. And they were very young, 18, 19. And I found that they don't see the dangers of it. I don't think they believe that it can affect them to a certain point. That's what I'm not sure.
Can I actually back up a little bit to something that you mentioned?
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what was mentioned, but it provoked a thought for me that I think that something about AI image production also makes us think a little bit more about what is art and what is the artistic process. I was reading an article on the bus down this morning that was talking about, does art need tedium? Does art need, that sort of slow, iterative process? And I think that's a really interesting question that I think AI provokes, and I think it relates as well to the idea of copyright and AI, that under a lot of legal standards, you can speak to this way better than I can, I'm sure, but that you need an element of human interference in the image in order for an AI generated image to be copyrightable. And I was thinking about this in terms of my own creative practice, where I do a lot of work with sustainable methods and developing images with foraged plants, and that's a really iterative process that has a lot of failure in it. But the failure, I think, helps me as an artist create something. And I think it's really important to my process, and I think it's really interesting to think about, well, artists working with AI, how does failure still come into that? What does that look like? So I do think I think maybe it provokes a bigger question about how we think about what makes something artistic or not artistic, and maybe that's something that students I'd be really interested to know how they grapple with that.
No, I think I mean, I think, yeah, I think it's working with the younger generation. It was interesting to sort of see how they engage with artistic practice. I don't think they don't expect to fail. They expect to make something work and that's it, and then move on. With the speed of, our life now, and it's such a different relationship they have with making images, they want to get it done and just move on. So I'm not sure they want to fail. they want to, but I think it's inevitable that you should fail, and it should be part of artistic practice. And I think AI can be very good at that, because that's when you get out of it something that is creative and goes beyond that static imagery that AI can produce. AI is simply just putting stuff out there that it learned from something and it just keeps repeating it. But obviously there are some glitches and things that can happen. So that's a really good point. Yeah.
Just in terms of students or what you're saying about the younger graduates or whatever, I do see a big danger, and I think because people who I know use it, it's great if you're a creative director or you're a senior and you can use it to help you get off the blank page, or get a start on something, use it to spark ideas. But you can critique it, you can do better than it can at the moment. But if you're younger and you're honing your skill, whatever AI can produce something perhaps that you can't get, you think, well, that's amazing. So how can you, and who's going to employ you to do I was terrible at whatever my first job was, you have to start and someone has to pay you to do not amazing work, and then you learn. So the danger is that disempowerment, because you have this machine, you can do a prompt and it can produce art, or produce things that maybe you can't. So how do you get those junior positions and acquire the skills and build that? It's a tool if you're a senior and if you know how to write something amazing or produce, it can be a tool if you're already good enough.
Yeah, but we did. But isn't it inevitable that in these systems that there is some sort of almost a feedback loop, so that it will inevitably collapse in a sense, because it needs to learn from something always new. So if it's fed the same information over and over, and even if it learns from something that it created, it will just keep repeating, and then inevitably it will collapse. Or is that not the case?
There's theories on that. There's theories that AI is changing the internet. We've created the stuff on the internet. There is no other internet for it to learn from, so it's stuck with what it has. And if now it's generating stuff that's going on the internet, so it's learning from itself, and that at some point it's called model collapse, or that's a theory. Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
But do you think but does that mean that it will always need fresh content, so therefore someone has to produce it? Otherwise, it won't evolve. Or is that also not the case?
It's hard to know. Yes, with the technology now to do anything better, it's data hungry. It needs more and more data to learn from. What if there's a leap in technology and you can it doesn't have an imagination. There is no vision. There is not trying to get any message across. It is mind-numbingly simple in what it actually does. But it's the fact that it's indistinguishable sometimes from human created content is the danger. But there could be a change in technology where you can say, imagine something, who knows?
I think the question also has to be where this image is coming from, right? So yes, it's being fed sort of this endless stream of images, but where are they coming from, and what are the copyright or intellectual property implications of that as well? What have we consented to by putting our work online? So I think it's a very multi-layered issue and multi-layered question.
No, absolutely. Not an easy question to answer. I think that's one of the issues around this what's happening now is also new, that we're witnessing something happening. There's so many good examples of artists using in their practice, but at the same time you see very work that doesn't, it's very derivative, or it doesn't use these tools in the correct way, or what we consider the correct way. I think the question about if it's art or not, I think that ship has sailed, to be honest, but many people still debate that. And that's something that we can also, maybe there are a few questions around that too. I was in Denmark, I think it was 2 years ago, where artists were presenting it, and even you mentioned Boris Atkelson, the person that submitted a photo to the Sony Award, prize, and then they didn't tell the awards that it was an AI image. And that he wanted to raise, obviously, questions around the ethical issues of these images. And there are many, many dimensions to that are complex. One of them obviously has to do with copyright and ownership, as we said. And how do we create then a system that is fair? I know this is a very difficult question, but what can we do starting now to make it fair in terms of the relationship between the people that produce these images, the artists, or it can be in a commercial context, those that have to work for these large companies that have to process these images. One of the examples I read that was quite shocking is that it was OpenAI. They hired, I think it was in Kenya, a group of people to filter all the horrible, traumatic images of violence, and they had to remove them. So there were humans looking at these images because there is no way to extract them. And so it's not that they're not part of these data sets, and the bias and those images are not there. And the other dimension is the monopoly of these companies that have full control of what we consume and what is produced. So what are there things happening now that you're aware of, or ways of ethically, creating, ethical systems that could help us defend?
Yes, lots. So there's lots going on, and so there's lots of regulation coming out. But I think, take photography. It's important to use technology as a tool, and photographers I know their cameras instantly, all the pieces and what they all do. If you start using AI, you don't know if there's a data it's using you, because you're feeding it, you're taking the images and saying, hey, there's the image, train it, and you can just reproduce it. So you've got to understand it. So total literacy around AI. And if you're using packages, you've got to demand that when AI is being used and when it's not. So if you're enhancing something, is it AI driven or not? That line has to be true for authenticity, and also to make sure that you're in control. And there's big cases in the literary world anyway, New York in particular, I'm thinking of a few cases about copyright. So getting involved in that, I see less of that around visual arts, and I'd love to see more. There's also groups, this is in journalism in particular, but I'm sure there's groups saying, okay, we have AI labeled content, but also human. So if you take photographs, that you can have this kind of on the metadata or whatever, this is genuine human created. And I think that will have increased value, because then platforms can, and this will come, I would say, where platforms give you the option to filter out AI content or not. So you can have a guaranteed human label. So there's all of that, but I would really urge everyone to really participate in influencing and in helping implement the regulation. The door is wide open for participation, for all stakeholder participation, and that's probably the most important thing.
Absolutely, the point about labeling I think is absolutely critical, especially because I think we are very quick to distrust images now. When we see images, there's sort of this gut reaction that's been manipulated. Is it AI? I think the Content Authenticity Initiative by Adobe is a really interesting resource. They have a lot of tools as well, so I really encourage people to have a look at that if you're not familiar with it. And I mean, to your point about the graphic imagery and that tagging, I mean, that's a massive issue. There's a really interesting book for anybody who might be interested called Graphic, and that was recently published, and it talks a lot about sort of this consumption of graphic imagery, but especially for people who are working in those industries where you are tagging graphic content and how to protect yourselves, but also what organizations can do and the processes that organizations can embed to make that a more ethical process. I think there's some really good suggestions in that book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So human oversight is important, I would say, and human presence in the end, isn't it? I think that's a big aspect. And also this, generating this diversity and training the data, and also I think that's important too. I did ask questions to ChatGPT. I have to say, how could I not when I was preparing? And I wanted to use the, one that I had asked was, will AI kill photography? And it said no. So it was quite good, and it said no, because, human creativity is so important. I was reading that answer, it's like, are you saying what I want to hear, or is this, something that is, but obviously that is a part that I think is really interesting and quite hilarious actually when we're engaging with these systems now. I didn't, one thing I did also was I put our profiles and asked what would be the best first question, which I didn't use, to be honest. But it was a very general, question. And I found that very interesting too. I'm not sure if people have questions at this point, so you can continue the debate. Yes, please.
I'm not that familiar with all the lingo, but I think I read a paper, I think we're co-authored on back in 2020 maybe. It's just about the gender gaps and the data gaps in the training corpus. And the fact that, as an artist, if you want to sort of like get annoyed or angry or respond to it, and that like articles that may be critiquing discrimination, the AI will pick up the language beside each other. So even if you're sort of trying to highlight the fact that, discrimination against women or different minority groups, the AI will pick it up and nearly amplify it and still perpetuate. If you're trying to, when it uses stuff like Google News or something for, to get all the data, and when it comes to women discrimination and all that sort of stuff, the whole way training corpuses work and how, so you could be making something, you could be making an image or writing a piece, or you're saying this is wrong because women aren't just involved in housework and cleaning and minding children. The AI could pick up women cleaning, minding children. Is there anything, can regulation help stop that, or is that the technology maybe?
It's both. Regulation is being brought in to demand that these data sets are fair and the models. So you're right that different kinds of models can amplify bias. They're already there. Some can amplify it and some less so, it seems. So see, it's like if you wanted to, teach a child to read, you're not going to sit there in front of Reddit and say, off you go. That's the last thing you do. You curate, you get lovely children's books and curate them nicely, but that's what you're doing with these models that produce. So they've learned from large data sets like Reddit, that kind of thing, and whatever's on the internet, works and all.
And I think this also goes to the point, we were talking about like the importance of having diversity in photographs in the data set, but it's also about the keywording, right? Because the keywording is always done from a perspective. So I think we really have to think very carefully and very critically about who is doing the keywording, how are things being keyworded, and what kinds of stereotypes are being encoded in that process.
Yeah, so the regulation, just on the AI Act, on that, it's crackling, but I don't know, why do this up there? All right, on the AI Act, it's saying they want transparency into where the data is coming from. But the transparency into the labeling isn't necessarily there. I think that's really important aspect. And just to give you an insight into the images, the multimodal models where you put in a prompt and then it generates them. So there's human labeling, but there's also, it will say, this image appeared on that web page, and that's the text around that image. and if you use that, that's why you get those associations.
That's it. One other interesting thing about keywording that I recently learned is that a lot of the really rich data sets are often images that are used to sell things online. And so a lot of the keywording is done from a commercial perspective. And so that's being embedded into a lot of these models as well, which I think is just a really fascinating way of thinking about it as well, or thing to be aware of when we're using those things. And I think that maybe goes back to what you're saying is cultivating an awareness of how do these things work, I think is really important if we're going to use them as artists. To know how is it being trained, where is it learning from, or even making your own models. I think there's some really interesting artists who've been creating their own models, and that's a really self-reflexive, I think, approach that you can take as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think we all should contribute to these, systems. We should be waiting for, large companies or specialists to do it because it's not embedded in our lives anyway, and we should be aware. There is a bit of a black box thing taking place also, isn't it? We know these things, we know the output, but we don't know how it works. And so this debate is really important because we're talking about that and deconstructing all this, saying, no, this works in a specific way. It's not like magic or it relies on us to survive and to evolve, and we should all be contributing to it. And, showing our perspectives and saying, no, this is not correct, this is correct, or, it needs to be as diverse as possible. And, I think it's getting there slowly, and I think you're more aware of it. Yes, of course.
I don't know if we all have to contribute to it.
No.
Do you know? I mean, I think that we should be thinking about what is it learning from and what kinds of biases are built into it. But I don't know that we all have an ethical imperative to necessarily contribute to it, because I think that there are a lot of other considerations that we should think about as well in terms of like the environmental impact of AI. I don't think that can be ignored, and I we have to be thinking about our impact more broadly, not just to the sort of image creation and the impact of our images, but the impact of how we make our images, and environmentalism has to come into that, I think, which I'm sure the next panel will talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not to tread on their toes.
But I was more in the sense of the awareness needs to exist. We need to be aware of it. Obviously, not everyone will be, contribute directly into it. Well, although we might be, because we're always producing things. We do take images with our phones and all that. Yeah, but I understand your point here. So those environmental issues are important. We didn't really cover that, but it's the impact of, these are servers that's a very simple fact, isn't it? There are servers that store all this information. The computer power that is necessary to produce this is enormous. So there are debates on that. I remember debates about, this is a tangent about Bitcoin, for instance, where some people defended Bitcoin and said, no, it's not that bad. It's lovely to have virtual money, but is it really virtual? You still need sort of physical place to store this thing. So, and I think with AI, that's a big issue, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
One question. Surely we should be thinking about how and why we use AI. AI is great for something like radiography, where we can do much better work than the human. But maybe it isn't that in making art, or maybe, and also it's a misunderstanding, because art isn't really about picture making, it's kind of about putting things together. And I suppose AI does that, but in a weird way, I think we're missing the point, because the copyright of, art, in some ways, it's kind of strange idea anyhow about scarcity, but I think art is another way of operating, so I don't think that AI will ever kill it, or even photography. And then photography still has a really important role in society as acting as a witness. So the idea of people playing with photography is actually really super important, and particularly in times of massive crisis, in times of war. So I think we still have to hold on really tight to photography, and then we also have to think about who is pushing this agenda and this myth of AI as this article, which really isn't.
I totally agree with you. And there was a report last year too about Irish businesses, like only 53% are using AI, and that needs to be raised, and it's way behind other countries. I think, but the question here is on generative AI. So to me, all that means is less Irish people are using, ChatGPT to write emails or write their reports, which I think is a good thing. And I think it reflects well. And you're right, so AI is great for radiography, but why are we putting all our, all this intellectual focus on making people, not have to write so much, or not have to create imagery, or not have to employ graphic designers, or not, it's of all the problems that need to be solved, writing should, or,
And also an energy crisis,
Yeah.
now people can't even write on that.
Exactly. So I would urge extreme caution for photographers or artists in using it.
I also completely agree with all the points that you've made. I think that I think there are interesting examples, and I think you're completely right. We have to think really carefully about when are we using it and why are we using it, and is it the right tool for the thing, right? I think we need to do that all the time. But and I think that there are really interesting examples that we could look at where AI has been used. For example, if you're familiar with the project Exhibit AI, I think is a really interesting use of generative AI to create a record of human rights abuses where there weren't any photographs in systems. So I think that there are examples where it can be used toward really positive, or, it's complicated because then we can always get into the issue that creates around the idea of trust in records or visual records. So it's not without complication, but I do think that there are interesting reasons to do it, but I think you're completely right that it needs to be done with care. It needs to be done critically. We need to think about why are we using that as a tool? Is that the right tool? Because, and I also think you're completely right, like photography as a witness, there are lots of, that's not going to go anywhere, I don't think, absolutely.
Thank you, that's a very good question. You opened a can of worms there, anyone, which I knew was coming, so. No, I think it's a very valid point. I think one of the debates is that should we be calling what AI produces photography? And some people think not. So I know that Boris Adelson, the Sony Awards person, calls it promptography. So you prompt something and it produces an image, it's text image. So there are maybe alternatives, and maybe that's the way it's a different thing. And then there are photography stays where it is. So there's
Right.
It also is an interesting way of engaging with imagination through kind of weird literature.
yeah.
So I think it's not that I think we shouldn't do it, but I think it has loads of potential, but then it has loads of silly uses that are just wasteful.
Yeah, and it should, as we said, it shouldn't replace something that already exists. It's meant to add something to it, and we should embrace it that way.
Writing with Light also is an organization that created like a glossary of terms, which is quite interesting, which might be of interest to people who are interested in this sort of like, what do we call it now? What is this thing?
I feel like I'm getting old in photography when I can remember this feels like that was the fourth existential threat to the medium I've sat and enjoyed debates over, and I don't want to get into, I think we'll find out in a few years whether AI was another blip or maybe it's something more. But I think one of the things I reflect on when I try to remain positive about it is so many of those existential threats to photography as a medium have often increased its appeal or its accessibility or its distribution as a medium. But I don't feel AI is doing that or not. So I may be posing that as a question if we feel it's doing that. The examples I think of is the internet or photography then being at odds with contemporary art, it's more accessible, or smartphones, everyone is a creator. Is that decreasing the value of photography? Is AI another one of those that is making it more accessible and more distributed? Are there now more images?
I don't think so, but maybe some you might disagree. I don't know, I don't think it's making it more accessible. Photography is, well, what is accessibility? And this idea of the photography democratic is also complicated because not everyone has money to buy a camera or a phone, or so it was a very westernized perspective of what is accessibility and photography being available to everyone to create art. So it's very limited. I mean, I was in a workshop where some people from Madagascar, where they were talking about what forms of art they grew up with, and some of them were like burying peanuts in the sand, and which is so beautiful, and it's an activity that is deemed artistic. So depending on where you live and how so that's another dimension of it. I don't know, do you have an answer to?
I don't know if accessibility is really what that's complicated, because I have heard some artists say that they do feel that it has made it easier or more affordable for them to create certain types of images that they wouldn't be able to do without studio lighting, and maybe they don't have access to studio lighting. So I think that there are arguments for the idea that it has increased accessibility. I don't know if I'm completely convinced that it is this great democratizer of the medium, What I do think is maybe quite interesting when you're thinking about, those ideas of those existential threats to photography is I do wonder if this turn will turn people more into more interested in the process, so how images are made, and maybe more tactile processes, and I think that could be quite interesting. And maybe that does something for photography, but also maybe that can counteract the democratization of photography. Maybe that makes what is photography and the processes associated with that, especially if we're looking at analog methods, maybe that makes it less accessible, ultimately. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the big tests also for AI is it will be the primary and secondary markets of when you sell imagery, because that side of things hasn't been fully explored. Those areas of photography, that particular area of photography, those people have not really been interested in it. And once they are, I feel that the capitalist system will again take over and potentially change things. This has happened a lot too. So that might be a shift at a certain point. When money enters the conversation, the value of AI art might change, and then inevitably that will affect production, and people will start doing it because they can see the value of it commercially.
Yeah, I'd love to see an analysis, take Ireland and the creative arts sector, and artists from when they start, where does the money come from, so if you're a company and you're creating an advertisement, so you're going to, pay to use a particular photograph, or you're going to go to an AI model and generate that. And so how does that affect the industry and the sustainability?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
In the economic sense. But I think from a creativity and from pure art, I don't think there's any replacing photography, is my view.
Who knows?
I think everybody in the room probably agrees with that.
Well, one knows, yes. Because we were surrounded by beautiful images, and so there is obviously space for
I think there's a sense that it's going to impact commercial photographers more. People doing, pack shots, advertising, I think that's where it's already, talking to people a few days ago, that's already having an impact. So I think the artistic vision is quite separate to something commercial, where it's really going to be using, stock and stuff.
All little probably is no longer using photographers and just types in
and that,
chicken inside a package.
but there's no artist hardly who doesn't supplement their income by other means. So
But
that's,
But that's a good point, but there's an inherent, I mean, with the students, I said, what you need to learn now is to take photographs, but also learn this promptography thing. Because Little might contact you and say, I want you to do all the images for the template. And you need to know, there are skills attached to it that are linked to, visual literacy, semiotics, how to, engage with the client in a very different way. So if they want, a specific type of apple, you probably need to, train that and see what text you write to produce the best image that satisfies the client needs. So that's something that I think photographers need to learn in that commercial sense. Yeah. Okay.
I think that there is like that whole ecosystem though, because that has so many knock-on effects for the creative industries, in terms of like set design and models. I mean, there are so many people involved in these processes that I think we do need to be thinking about what are the ripple effects of that in terms of a future for people to make a living in creative industries. I do think that there's a lot of thought that needs to be had.
No, absolutely, and the next year it'll be very, very important. And also, I was thinking about galleries and museums, and we engage with photography, and our attempts now to embrace AI and to bring that into our own, spaces. That'll be very interesting too, because it will be, so as a dialogue between the tradition of photography and then these new forms, but will we call it photography or not? Will be just, is it an expanded form of photography? Things that we are really just starting to debate now.
And are there existing codes or ethical guidelines, like if we think so, like photography has always been manipulated? So do you think there's going to be like a self-declaration code where will it be saying these images were made by, and then if you're photo prompting from your own catalogue, is that the way it's going to be, do you think?
I would think that's a good idea, and people should, organise and form, some standards, for, I think it's already being done, certainly for journalism, so if it probably is an organisation of, I think it's a really good idea, and especially for digital platforms as well.
Yeah, lots of photography prizes that started that process.
Yeah.
Of inventing rules that you cannot submit images that you find manipulated, or creating categories specifically for AI generated images.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Is there anything then that we should be doing here? Should we have a working group? Does any artist want to join a group and have a go and come up with a set of, like what can we do rather than waiting for something to happen? What can we do to help shape it?
Just to your previous point, again, writing with light is maybe worth looking at, because they have sort of a thing that you can sign, which is sort of saying that you're, agreeing with the idea that photography is made from the camera. But I think there is an added complication, which you mentioned earlier, which is that so much of AI, I don't know if you mentioned it during this panel before, but so much of our camera technologies have AI embedded in it. So we might not even be aware that we're using AI. And I think, again, that goes to sort of cultivating that awareness of the tools that we're using, knowing if our camera has AI embedded and what the impact of that's going to be. Because it's very hard to adhere to a set of principles or an idea about that if you aren't aware that you're actually using it. But absolutely, I think transparency is always critical with anything that we're doing. Being super transparent about how it was made. And I think if we're afraid to be transparent, we maybe need to interrogate why are we afraid of being transparent, that might be a little bit of a sign that maybe we need to rethink our processes if we don't want to tell people how we got there. So definitely, I think being super transparent when we're using AI is really the most important step, in my opinion.
And in terms of other things, there's a group I know, certainly music called AI OK, and they're a group that look at copyright for music and say might I don't know if they bring cases, but certainly education around AI and using it, but also music being used and models trained on it. So something like that perhaps.
Any other questions? You want to add anything before we finish? Some positive words?
I don't know how to sum this up.
It's difficult.
I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about. I think this conversation could go over a whole weekend, much less an hour, but absolutely, I think it's something that we all have a stake in. I think it's a conversation that we all, whether we want to or not, it behooves us to be literate about what's happening, whether or not we're actively engaging with it, because we will be, even if we're not creating images using AI, we will be consuming and viewing images that use AI. So I think we will be encountering it in one way or another. So I think, it's a conversation we're having.
Well, thank you so much.
I guess my last comment would be a call to arms in a way. There's so much regulation being brought in, and in terms of imagery and regulation, it's about misinformation and disinformation. So, and images being used, say, in election campaigns that may be AI driven or AI created. We've seen it in American elections, but we also saw the posters in Dublin as well, and images of a race of Irish people that never existed, tall, kind of amazing looking and red hair and impossibly green eyes. But what people who do photography understand is the power of those images and the impact they can have. And one thing I realised, I put so much effort into this, introducing regulations to ensure people know something's AI generated. But what I realised is it actually doesn't matter. Because when you look at some online platforms, the response is, oh, well, even AI thinks feminists look like this, or even AI thinks whatever. So it is spoken of as an article. So I think the understanding in this room of the impact of images, it's very immediate and it is emotive. It doesn't matter whether you're told it's AI generated or not, it has that effect. And it can shift cultures. And I think input is really important into the legislation and informing computer scientists and regulators of the effect images can have.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to kick off our last panel today, which is Photography Toward Climate Action, and it's chaired by Toby Smith, the Development Officer with Belfast Film Festival, and he's joined by Arthur Shane Hyman and Shirley Martin to discuss all issues like conservation, sustainability, and so Toby.
Darren and Tricia and Cynthia, thank you for having us, and also thank you for you all to stick around. We're going to try and get you through the last shift of the day with a good lively debate for an hour. Roughly titled Photography Can't Save the Planet, but it can help. I'm pleased to be here representing the Belfast Photo Festival. Disclaimer, I'm based in England and we're going to be talking about modern Peatland today, so I'm feeling a bit out of depth. I will need your help to get through this. But I do make no apology for a long-term career focus in photography and the environment and climate, so I'm really pleased to be sat here and tapping into that big majority of the issues I consider. And indeed, this year, the edition in June, our 10th edition, we showed Richard Moss's work on Broken Spectre, which represents a bit of an organisational turn to focusing on climate and environment. So I think it's a bit of a background, and excuse notes, so I wanted to go through some of these. I think we can agree that photography has a really rich and varied history of contributing to social and environmental change, and there's a lot of competing issues that photography needs to support and improve represent on. Climate, in my opinion, is one of them, as it underpins so many other issues, whether they're human or natural heritage. And there's lots of approaches. We're going to touch on maybe a slightly narrow band today, but there's obviously documentary, contemporary, vernacular, protest, participatory photography, AI, and other definitions of photography. And I think as I tried to emulate all my questions to another panelist earlier, I'm quite interested in that line between production of media or photography and campaign for change, and how that influences production as well. But we are going to narrow in on a particular focused part of that, which I feel is perfectly relevant to an expertise of my two amazing panelists I'll introduce in a sec. We're going to go deep on the intersection of photography in the bog and climate action, which is actually, I didn't realise had such a steep history in photography as well. And who we've got here to kind of live in this, and I'm going to try and moderate facilitating, is on the far side, Shirley Cleming. Shirley has been working in the environmental arena since 1998. I noticed that you called it an arena, and the word battle was in your biography as well.
That's what I'm next for.
Yeah, exactly. And it's with the Irish Wildlife Trust and other roles as a campaigns manager. You've now moved into the local authority system to lead heritage and biodiversity programs. No, is that okay? Okay. And the current role is leading a large-scale project funded by the EU's Just Transition Fund in Ireland to restore wetlands for both climate benefits and biodiversity. I think the just transitions and climate just transition is an important part of that. Here in the middle, we met last week and thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with them both. On the record today is Irish artist Shane Hyman, an MFA from Photography at Boston University, with a practice centred on photography, but including other experimental elements in sound, video, collage, and sculpture. We're going to touch on his ongoing project Beneath, drawing on conceptual, performative and subjective documentary approaches to reflect on endangered bog habitats of the post-industrial landscape of the Irish Midlands. And there's also some other collaborative projects and community in place Shane's going to touch on. But just to kind of wake you all up, I was fascinated to start my conversation with Shirley and Shane last week on this potentially little known or widely known publication, 1954, so celebrating its 70th anniversary today, as if we can consider how maybe photography can change the role and perception of or work produced by photographers to change the role and perception. I actually think maybe a really good place to start is a state-sponsored project. Nice to know even back then the state was sponsoring photography of some sorts.
Yes.
On changing industrial landscape. Do you want to give us a quick run into this and flick through?
Well, this publication was published by Board Namona, who are the State Board for Peat Extraction and Development in Ireland, in 1954. And it was essentially a booklet starting from what a virgin bog looked like, so a lovely raised bog which has got a round dome on it, which is the sphagnum moss holding the bog and all the water in it together, and a lovely dome surface. So going from this to all of the stages of production, showing all of the sexy machinery with little people for scale to show you how big and impressive the machines were, what big ditches they were going to dig through the Midlands, and how all of this was going to lead to the industrialisation of a wasted and a wasteland habitat. So industrialisation looked like this. This is all the ditches dug. These are all the lines of turf laid out. All the different machines they were developing, the innovation, in order to retain the people in the Midlands of Ireland, in rural areas, both working for Board Namona producing peat, working for Board Namona or the Electricity Supply Board producing electricity for the nation state, and also importantly staying in the villages that Board Namona built lovely clean and tidy houses in James Gidney's beautiful housing estates in the Midlands, lovely clean futuristic homes for everybody to live in. So moving from that very shameful kind of habitat, the no man's land of what they were sort of presenting it as, a wasteland that was now going to be brought into production for the benefit of everybody, to power the nation state, to make us into modern Ireland. And the very last image in this book actually is children at play, and that's what it's called, and it's children playing outside a village. So I just think that narrative is maybe something that would be very interesting to try to get back to, but reverse it and have children at play, our intergenerational justice, our justice moving forward, and how can photography play a role in that?
Who do you think this pamphlet of this portrait was aimed at in that sense, and to what end?
I think it was probably aimed at ourselves, to be honest with you, because it was it's a very patriotic leaflet, starting both from the imagery on the front and to the use of the old Irish script within, to the use of paper made in Ireland. Everything about it is very patriotic. So it is very much for ourselves, to show that this was a very good thing to do to the peatlands of the Midlands. Because don't forget, I'm sure there were people out there who liked the birds that were on the wetlands at the time, or were using them for other purposes, but how could you deny that? It's very hard to deny the progress that it was sort of proclaiming, as it was going along, and all that innovation, the machinery, all that stuff, like that engineering, that was very forward-thinking, in fact.
And I think also this type of photography was very emblematic of there's other work I've done on commission, example, for the Scottish Hydro Board of that era, and a similar rich photographic archives. And interestingly, it's very challenging to actually work out the photographer behind.
It doesn't say, I didn't find out who took the photographs. And it says it gives the printer or the publisher, but not who actually took the photographs. And it doesn't name any of the individuals who are working, obviously, either. So it doesn't name, Jimmy McCarthy, who's running the machine, or the guy standing beside the ditch. So it's very impersonal, industrializing kind of photography, like the Mills in England or somewhere like that.
And Shane, I know you're very familiar with this work as well. Before I come on to your own images, I just wondered if there's any extra context or way you position photography in this way.
I kind of think that
like perception of bogs and stuff is quite important. And also the idea of modernisation in the earlier stage, this idea of progress. I think the bogs in the olden days, pagan times were revered, and then in the 1700s they were feared, and then in the famine era they were seen as backward because people moved out on them. So I think that perception, and then when Ireland moved into new early stage, like it was Ireland, Russia, and then the Turk War, so like that. So this idea of progress, we're not backward, look at us, we're not.
We're not bad.
We're not backward. Maybe we were coming back and say we are now, so it's kind of okay. But yeah, photography, obviously photography didn't exist until early 1800s, so, and it was coming to its own, it's almost like propaganda in a way, the way it's been sold. And I think there was a feeling of pride. The Midlands was seen as a place that was very little, nothing there. It's still perceived as flyover country. So, you come to Dublin and you just drive across the motorway and go to the White Atlantic Way. So this is an area that was forever unseen or, never really looked at. So Bord Mona, it brought a sense of pride. People didn't have to emigrate. People could live, stay at home. There's loads of people I know that would have emigrated. Could have been himself, who knows? So that brought that sense of pride, and I think it was valid. And then obviously when the climate benefits of bogs came to the fore, it changed. There's another perceptual change. So like this idea of modern, that's going to have to change as well if we're going to survive. Like progress. What is progress? Is it GDP, or is it survival?
I think one of the things before we bring us closer to 2024 is I'm often interested in what photography can't do. As photographers, we can often have a lot of right obsession and interest in what its power and its impact as a media, but then we often, I think, maybe neglect or should consider more how it's part of a matrix of other culture and art. And I think, I'd love you guys to dip into potentially, I guess, some of the not competing culture, I'll change it, some of the more complementary culture that this kind of campaign of photography was mixed in at the time, which obviously predates photographic media, whether that be song or verse or superstition. Where is photography around bogs? What cultural landscape has it sat in other mediums?
I'm not sure how to answer that. But yeah, it is poetry. Like bogs have, there's a cultural imagining of bogs. For Irish people, it's kind of like the heart of Ireland as such. But then there's also this idea of like John Hind and the Quiet Man, this emigrant's view of Ireland, nostalgic kind of view. So that's in there as well. So there's this nostalgic cultural imagining from the Irish diaspora and beyond of what bogs are, what they mean. And then it's also what they mean to people who live on the turf. It's a different meaning. But bogs are associated with Ireland. And I kind of think, like I mentioned that earlier, like we growing up near a bog, like people speak a certain way, and then if someone comes in from outside, you don't speak that way because that's backward. So there's always this perception of backwardness associated with bogs that I found. So I think now they're kind of seeing, like during COVID, the bog suddenly became, the bog road was the best place you go for a walk and no one's around. So it was a wonderful place, and I think that changed the perception and also this movement towards climate change and mitigating it. It's kind of that perception. I don't know if it really answers it, but I think the imagining what the perception that a bog brings to your mind, where you're from, and Ireland, I think that's really important.
Excellent. I mean, it's a good place to bring in your series of images while you answer this.
Can I just say, so I think that from a photography point of view, because bogs are, they're big landscapes, generally speaking. So from the point of view of a peatland, you've usually got either a raised bog, which is a kind of a dome, or you have big flat landscapes over hills and mountains, say, like blanket bogs. But they look very homogeneous from a distance. So they look like kind of a mottled brown and maybe a bit of purple if you've got some heather. But it's really only like that when you get up close that you really see the detail in a bog and the diversity that's there, that's holding together that bigger landscape. And it's really, I would say, like the likes of the Tina Claffey's book, which is here, or the easier, this one underneath, the one where it starts to become easier to take micro photographs, that has brought the biodiversity of bogs to a wider audience. Because before she started really doing that for Irish bogs, I know that the guys that were taking the dragonfly pictures were often kind of putting the dragonflies into a box quickly to cool them down and putting them back on the leaf to get a picture to keep them still. And if they didn't stay still long enough, so they were interfering with the species in order to take the photograph. Whereas now with better technology, you can get really good micro photographs that shows the species diversity. But that's the difficulty with bogs. The detail is really in the detail, you know? And you don't notice detail is gone, and you can still have the same colour.
I think I personally, when reviewing Shane's work, really enjoyed. I see, and maybe also in my own career as a photographer, that a bog would be a challenging environment to photograph in a compelling way due to its nature. But Shane, I've got your images in order here that you shared with me. Should I let me know when you want to advance the slide? I think I really enjoyed your approach, and maybe not the microscopic proximity, but the sense of place that comes through is fantastic. So, good luck.
Sure. I suppose, like, in terms of landscape and environmentalism, there tends to be two kind of strands. Like, one is to kind of look at nature and glorify it, show how great it is, and then the other is probably to show human interaction, and usually that's a negative thing. It's very always a negative thing. So that's kind of the end that I'm at. So this image is taken, I think, Stephen's Day in 2017. It's the first image that really worked for the project, and it's still one that I go back to. Most of the work that I show off this now is pretty recent. People haven't seen it yet. About 3 years of work there, people haven't seen it. So kind of, the project started for me around feelings and melancholy and loss, and I kind of wanted to translate that into a landscape. And I was reluctant to use the bog, but then it became a perfect landscape to actually to look, to communicate that kind of feeling. So these kind of damaged landscapes, so I came at it very early on in a very eco-warrior type of way. This is part of what to do, you know, so so I started to look at landscapes, I started to look at the damage and kind of showing exactly what it was. As I moved on and started to realise that this was an industry that sustained an area in a region, and it was a tradition. So it's not just so this is obviously peat harvesting, this is an industrial scale, and then there's turf pulling and stuff that's more traditional. And just kind of a lot of cultural identity attached to that. So people came into it, the industry came into it, you can move on to the next industry and machinery and stuff around that, community, people, landscape. So all these stories started to come into it. So it became an environmental kind of thing without it meaning to be an environmental thing. And it's funny that it's been going for about 7 years, so I feel like kind of coming full circle with it now. And this is a new regenerated landscape. So this was pretty recent. So this is kind of what these transitional landscapes look like. But people don't see these landscapes, like bogs don't sit in the side of the road. You don't generally see them. You do sometimes see them in the Midlands where they're near power stations, but generally you don't see them. So I think that's kind of unseen or unknown. People don't really see it, or it's overlooked and it's misunderstood. The bog is misunderstood. Like I often think people like you and Charlie was talking about it there, like the biodiversity. Like if I'm standing there in the photograph and waiting for the light, the clouds to be just right. It could be an hour. I'm looking around at the ground and there's a little world there in that, and then that informs thinking and stuff like that. So maybe we move on there.
Well, maybe we can pause on this image, because I think, to me, this is someone who reads a lot of landscape imagery. I really view this as a degraded landscape, not one in restoration. Under that layer, I think we flooded. That's the element to it. I think photography is often guilty of, we've had the giant Ed Bratinsky slideshow of degraded and, quote, manufactured landscapes that are informing our thinking, but in order to produce that work, they're often seeking out these exotic or cinematic or aesthetically driven landscapes to illustrate the point of climate degradation or environmental degradation. But I think what Shane's work's doing and what I see in climate or environmental photography we're doing is to incorporate the complexities and the intersecting factors. Because it's not just an environmental landscape, it features so much more in the richness of culture that we need to address the wider position that our landscape occupies, not just how it looks like when we think it's degraded, because that's actually a landscaping restoration, for example.
And like in restoration, like this re-flooding or re-wetting of the peat soils here with all these bunds, like that also requires a lot of machinery to go in there as well. You know, so you've used the industrialization process to extract all that peat, but you're also again have to bring all those diggers back in again to construct all these bunds. You know, and you need the people who know how to go on there with a machine that's not going to sink straight away down through all of that, because there's less solids in peat than there is in milk, for example. So, you know, you have to understand that landscape, and the people who understand the landscape the best are those who have already worked in extracting the peat, obviously. You know, so the whole point about the just transition is that you're transitioning these landscapes. And the landscapes are always in flux because ecological processes are always moving and changing and making, but it's an unfinished landscape. But, you know, we need the people who are part of that just transition to help the landscapes transition. Because if we leave the landscape unwetted, for example, we're just going to have dust, you know, dust flows basically around the Midlands. It's not, we're going to have more methane, you know, coming up with those landscapes and more climate emissions in those degraded landscapes. But you're absolutely right. It looks, you could look at that and not know what you're looking at, you know?
So the other bit that I think we talked about in the prelude to this, which I think environmental photography is often guilty of, is polarizing people's opinions. And I think we've seen in this that we need to engage with the community, and we need to work out how we can do a just transition that's leave behind. But they've also, I think, the media hasn't potentially been successful in how it's treated these subjects.
Yeah, that was something that I came to the fore the last couple of years, and I started to meet communities, and I got involved in the Community Wetlands Forum, which a lot of different communities are coming together. And just communities in different, some of them have re-wetted projects, others are thinking about stuff like that. So once I started to meet people, I kind of like Boardman stopped harvesting in 2019 and ceased a lot of peat production, well, all of it actually, but kind of the branding was from brown to green, and it was this kind of complete erasure of the past, like the brown doesn't exist anymore, it's gone. And a lot of the communities were complaining about lack of community engagement. So, and then also the media, a massive problem with the media really, because I felt that it was really polarized. It was like conservationists one end, tough covers on the other, and the goodies and the baddies. And it really was unhealthy because it's really complex. It's a really complex issue. Like it's a local issue, it's a regional issue, it's a national, it's a global issue. Like it's, you're taking away something from people, you're taking employment, sense of self-worth, I suppose, as well. You're taking traditions as well, because the turf is still got turf, but that could be gone as well. So, and there's anger and there's resistance to change. So if you pitch, there's a lot in Middleground where most people live. That's not being discussed now. You go to the Community Wetlands Forum, that is where most people live. So it's, yeah, I find it quite problematic. And like living where I live in the country, in a rural area, you can see that there is an urban-rural divide. The rural people are kind of getting screwed, and there's a real lack of understanding there. And then it's the the real story of the ground is not being told. So so the landscape work I have tells its own story, but also I'm interested in telling the people's story. So it sits differently, it's a different tone. So like this is the shot from a Heritage Day where they're recreating how they would hang turf. One guy's in period clothes, there's not. But it's different to my other work. The tone is different, but there's a different thing in it. So it's a different strand within my work now, and I did start another collaborative project with two other artists in Kildare. We're going to try and do some community engagement with people, and it's going to be initial phases. We're going to gather oral testimony from the older people, and then we're going to get younger people to come in and respond to that. It's like the past, present, and the future. We don't know the outcome of the project, nor do we know the outcome of the transition of the landscape. So, yeah.
I think maybe that's one thing that's overlooked because a lot of people engage in photography in its finished projects. Shelley, I know that in the part of your biography that I watched in the intro, there was quite a few different methodologies that you worked with regards to public engagement, but maybe I'm interested in hearing about maybe the value of that participatory process in producing those outputs compared to even the outputs itself and how that fitted in with positive outcomes.
Sure, well, in my previous life, before I started managing this project, I was a heritage officer. So, and as a heritage officer for County Monaghan, the whole idea is that you weave natural heritage and cultural heritage, the tangible and intangible together, and you produce, either you might produce a restored historic building, for example, or produce a restored bog, or some survey work, or indeed you might do a photography project. And I was involved with 2 photography projects here, for example, one being on Drum Village in County Monaghan, where we brought a photographer here, Kevin, thank you very much. Kevin, says his surname Fox. You reckon I remember his name? Kevin Fox to Drum Village, which is a small village on a hill, as the name suggests, Drum, in Monaghan, and we worked with the community there in and around their sense of identity, I suppose, and the fact that a body of work had been made about them and their village, and that had never been returned to their village, really, and class them. And his work, he was staying in Annacarrig and way back in the day, and he'd gone to the local pub and he was feeling very grief-stricken at the time, and he took these really beautiful series of photographs of particularly this one man in Anderson's pub. But the people in Drum Village, this book was lauded as a photo book, but the people in Drum Village, you could see this photo book, that was all of their, neighbours and relations. So Trish and I, in the gallery of photography, we brought the book back to Drum Village. Kevin worked with the people in Drum. It was a very long process, 2 years. And then we also cleaned out the pub, where the derelict pub, well, it's not derelict anymore, someone I bought it and lives in it. But at the time we cleaned it out and we re-showed the imagery in the pub at night time on the walls inside the pub. And it was like a ghostly, amazingly moving project, because it was about the identity of the people who lived in Drum, but it wasn't poking at their identity. It wasn't, or like we can't do in the Midlands, we can't poke at people's identity, for example, who cut turf, or poke at people because they worked in Bordenamona. Those are respectable occupations. We can't demonise that behaviour, because that provided livelihoods and sustainable livelihoods for people in a particular time. What we have to do now is bring them forward while being able to acknowledge that without making them feel guilty about it, because a lot of the research that has been shown, and likewise for people in Drum, not to feel guilty about their identity. One of the bits of research that Dr. Kate Flood has done, interviewing people in the Midlands about cutting turf and being involved in peat extraction and all of that emissions and all of that destruction of nature, if you want, so that they felt really guilty about it, but they don't want to feel guilty about it because this is their livelihood, and it makes them, obviously, how can you change and approach a new way of doing something if you're made feel bad about something you've already done? Everybody needs to be able to accept that, because that was the story of the country. It's an individual story, an individual livelihood, but it's much bigger than that. And from the point of view of photography then, the role that the photography part had in the Drum Village was that it made people seen. You were seen in your current community, in your current place, and you weren't, being, the polarisation wasn't there, which is very important. Particularly in this time of all these wicked environmental complex problems and all this polarisation. So the less we can poke at people's identity, and the more that we can work with them to share what's common, I think is really important. And I think photography could play a really important part in that.
As someone who's sat across environmental photography now, for over a decade, I've seen firsthand how that polarisation can alienate and weaponise the exact communities who, ironically, the environmentalists are hoping to find solutions for. There's some really strong examples in, the Alberta tar sands in northern Canada, for example. The need for that community to just transition to a viable income, and the amount of carbon at stake is of a mass industrial scale that has aesthetic similarities to what we've seen with peat cutting. And they were villainized by the international world media and environmentalists. And only now Are we realising that for a just transition, the key's there?
And it's not always the environmentalists that are demonising anybody, just as I think what Shane said is very correct. It's just an easy way to build a narrative for a story in a particular, to frame something. So it becomes an easy way to frame an argument where it's a very complex argument. So it's brought down to the simple, black and white kind of thing, rather than looking at all the nuances.
And thankfully, it's easy to say in this room, it's that longer form or conceptual approach that hopefully you can get past that. Whereas I think often photography is consumed in social media or single images, where you don't get any of that nuance or even the caption, let alone AI, truth or not caption as well. Maybe that will come. Any other pieces? I think we're talking about opportunity as well. I mean, one of the things I'm seeing as a massive bit of hope on this, a bit doomy gloomy here on this, exactly. So there is an urgency, and I think one of the things I'm seeing is how a lot of photography and media and journalism and art is deliberately blurring their sectorial boundaries over what is action and what is art and what is journalism and what is media, and those kind of identity camps as to what part of photography you're in can be blurred by a theme or a cause. And I think it's lovely to hear that it wasn't the original intention of your engagement with this project was to think about the environmental approach, but was there a point when suddenly did you nurture that part of it? Did the story tell itself that it became environment, or was it because that was what was contemporary about our view of Botland at the moment? I'm wondering, was there a seed where you thought, crikey, I'm doing a project that's got environmental focus to it?
I think it was when I researched the term just transition and looked up the UN website and what it was, and social and climate justice going hand in hand, and obviously economic as well. So I think that idea of change is holding things together, and I wanted to hold the Torquaters and the conservations, even though that's not the binary end. There's lots along that spectrum, but I wanted to bring those sides together and show all of it, hold it all together, and let the tension be there. So that was where it got really interesting, in the tension and the conflict, and that's what is change, like in resistance to change, and some people want it more than others, and it's not just one person's choice. So I think that's where, and duality, and a lot of duality in things voting against one another, and there was so much that I could list 20 different things, but that's where it got interesting for me. And I changed, so I've been away for 4 years, and before I started this work and came back, and just seeing the pause is interesting because I've been away. Yet it's familiar. So, and initially it's like this terrible, it's an environmental disaster. But then once people started, once I softened again to people and listened to what they said, what people would say, and people knew that they were doing wrong. I think 90% of people knew that we shouldn't really be doing this, but I want to do it as fast as I can. So, and that, just transition is exactly what transition is. A transition. It's not, you don't just fall off a cliff, and you don't just erase the past and create a future. That was the film Don't Look Up. I was suggesting maybe borrow on something like that, because so you have to look down to look up. You have to hold it all together, and you can't blame someone for what they did in the past if they didn't know it was wrong. So. And that pride, I think that loss of pride in people, that's something I just kind of felt like I had their back. And I would kind of think, I would say that I have 60% got the environment's back, 40% got the people's back. So maybe lean a bit more into environmentalism. People matter too. So.
And as a photographer, an artist, and you define yourself as both in different contexts, do you feel that's a safe vantage point to hold those discussions with the different groups, or are you treading carefully?
I am treading very in the waters. I got involved in our local water committee, which looks after cut and turf. And I think when I joined, the average age went down by, I don't know, mostly in their 70s and stuff like that. So I'm not that young, but the average age down a lot. So we started this discussion, me and one of the guys, 11 people on board, or on the committee, and 2 of us were talking about, maybe let's think about doing something slightly different in the future, and maybe making room for something other than Turkey. And now in my local community, I'm kind of seen as someone with a green agenda, and not only have a green agenda. The another community I'm seeing is someone who's celebrating this older traditional cultural identity. So it's, I got way too close to it, and maybe I needed to get close to it to step back again. But from that, being right in the middle of that discussion, there was a lot in that friction. It's maybe something I don't know if photography can really do, and I think text helped there. So maybe I might write something about that actual, the heat of that two things working together. So it's been very difficult, and I step back a little bit.
Yeah.
And I prefer to be an observer rather than be in the middle of things. I call it before.
So I think one of the things remembering that the Irish Photo brought us together, and I think at least 3 of the organisations on that, Belfast Expos, ourselves as the Photo Festival, and obviously
Source magazine.
Source Magazine, we're all making strides on always trying to represent photography for it to become a value. And when I mean value, I mean blunt. We're trying to find funding to generate social and in this context, environmental impact work. I think it's got a real role to play in that. But maybe, Shirley, one more question, and if it's too close, because I know you are operating under the banner of funding and government. I feel we're starting to get traction in being able to fundraise and get these initiatives off the ground, whereas previously we were spending lots of money commissioning photographers in the 50s to do it. Is there to use an annoying term, is there a theory of change? Is there a system change thing? Is there some extra value we can associate with photography that would mean, to be frank, state funders or philanthropists would want to see photography used in this area, beyond peak blogging as well?
Well, I hope, I don't know if you've missed a boat or not, but we had a thing out in Eton just called Cultural Custodianship and Heritage of Wetlands, which is closed now, which included photography. But what I think actually is missing is that we're very good at photographing, like, for example, celebrating nature. So, and you can celebrate nature at all scales, and you can have one last species, one last plant, and you can still photograph that and multiply it and put it all over the internet, and somehow there's more than the one. But you still only have one, right? You know what I mean? And we're all very good at stepping back and, being a witness, and photography is a witness. And we're very good, even scientists, at stepping back and witnessing the decline of everything, and witnessing all the species numbers dropping, and witnessing our habitats crashing, etc. We're very good at stepping back and monitoring that and saying, oh no, we may well put in a new monitor, we put in a new hydrological monitor, we put in another 2 years worth of surveying on that site or whatever. But actually, what we really need to kind of do, and somebody mentioned risk earlier on, taking some risks. Actually, it was yourself, but it was with regards to, you're adjudicating funding, whatever. It's the same thing for action, being action of restoration on sites. That we need the restoration of nature and the restoration of bogs in order to meet any climate targets, in order to have resilient ecosystems in Ireland, so that when the weird weather continues, which it will, because we've already set it in motion, that at least flooding isn't going to be as bad. At least we're not going to have sediment running off into all of our rivers. At least we're going to have robust habitats that can kind of be healthy enough to be resilient for all of that, and our communities can be resilient. And photography, I think, has to try to somehow, a bit like that Bord na Móna 1954, which promoted innovation. It promoted the machines that were doing the work and the people, but it promoted, like, what does a machine in a turf bog look like? What does the greenhouse gas flux things look like? What are the LiDAR images that are being used to inform ecologists about what habitats look like? All of that, that's all photography. But even if you look at the circulars that come out from the government, or the information sheets that you fill in if you're a turf cutter that you wanted to sell off your turf rights, there's no photographs in there. There's a lack of photography, actually. So there's a lot of descriptions and terms and glossaries and all sorts of things about exactly what the scientific term means. But there's very little of the visual imagery being used to actually provoke action and to help us to get more action. So the systems change models. So wherever something is working, you should do more of that one thing. So if restoration is working over there, you should do more restoration. If funding over here is producing more of the thing you want, you should put more funding into that. System change models also show that at the moment, there's one kind of paradigm which would be turf cutting, say, the industrialisation of landscapes, and that would be one big graph going this direction. And there's another paradigm emerging, which is sort of all chaotic at the moment, and that's the paradigm, say, of restoration. And at the minute, we're in the middle of that chaos, right? But what we need is photography to somehow provoke us and inform us and help us keep making that shift to make sure we can be on the right path. I'm not a photographer, I don't know, just to say that.
Excellent. I'm going to open this up. Darren, I've lost track of time, so give me the nod and I need to close it off. Thank you. And I think I invite questions. I remind you we're on a broad field of climate action and photography, which is already quite narrow, but you can step off the block if you want to go there as well. Please do. Savannah's the first hand up.
I think there's something really interesting about the conversation that you're having about this like polarization, which I think in my mind really actually mirrors some of the polarization that you're saying in the photography industry, this idea of reconciling historical practice with current knowledge. And I think there's something really quite beautiful about using a medium that shares that sort of complicated negotiation of its task and that trajectory. And I guess going forward, like how do you see using photography toward action, and who is the audience of that, and to what end? Like, what can photography do, I guess, which is kind of a broad question, but yeah, as a medium.
Shane, you were doing your context
Yeah, I don't know if it's that positive an answer. Like, in many people who come into the gallery to see my project, like, and engage with photography that way, like, the photography is misunderstood, blogs are misunderstood too, I suppose, but it's hard to know. Like, I try to, I think like Robert Adams' work where he actually shows the landscape as it actually is, really influences me, like, and that's subtle, to be subtle about it, rather than bombastic and saying that's a terrible thing, you know. Like Susan Sontag spoke about, like, in the Painted Butters cigarette box, was a picture of somebody who's died from some terrible disease, like, and yet people still smoke, you know. So, like, is actually stuff is really damaging landscapes and language that says this is terrible thing, you know, stop doing that. Does that help? No. You know, and then there's people who are doing it and are benefiting from it. So I think there needs to be conversation. I think that's like dialogue between all the parties involved. Photography has various roles. Media use it in one way, board one, corporate entities use it in another way. That's a new thing. And it's not just board one, it's glitch as well. There's other bodies there that we're using, putting forward. Like the whole idea of environmentalism and climate change has been qualified completely. Like bogs are still a commodity, they're not being left alone to regenerate. They are being really, like, there's pictures showing that they are, like my picture even shows that it is, but on the wind farm and stuff, it's not the case, and the solar farm it's not the case either. It's a lot of structures that go on. So it's yeah, so I think photography, what does it, maybe photography and text, you know, how like photography and text goes well together, you know, but yeah, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one.
I'm going to tell you that. I mean, one of the things I'm frustrated about in environmental photography is really crap at showing things being left alone and doing well, because it looks like exactly how it should, which we've already seen. And the other one which really annoys me, and I get sometimes excited about how AI might contribute if it gets better, is photography is really good at showing our active and complicit destruction of landscape and what things are starting to look like if we don't address issues. But it's really crap at showing how they might look in 20 years' time if they're doing well. Like, it can't time travel, it's a documentary medium. And maybe AI or contemporary photography has to go. So these are gentlemen who show this.
Yeah, that's a good question, Shane. Just wondering how you feel your work with being altered if you weren't dealing with the legacy of state entity, you know, having a private company that was extracting the turf, or it was a series of individual farmers, and making work around Loch Ness at the minute, and it's been the environment around the Loch Ness. And there's a lot of private companies and a lot of small individual farmers, so there's no kind of state body that is kind of umbrellas. And also, do you think your work might be altered if you are dealing with a legacy of a company or just individuals?
My work is 100% altered by the fact that Board of Monitor were a semi-state body, because there's still individual, like what you mentioned in your work, there's still a lot of private individuals still harvesting peat for horticulture. That's still happening privately. I think the EPA are trying to shut them down and make them get licensed. So they can still, but some of them legally. But there was a point around 2021 where I spoke to Board of Monitor and got them to come in and see some work in an exhibition, and they started in the media, I think, and we started talking about maybe giving money towards something in the future and maybe getting to do corporate work. And then I had another exhibition and they asked 4 or 5 times if they want to put some money towards it. And never answered. But around the same time as engaging with community wetlands and stuff, engaging with communities, they actually seen the reality of how this company was dealing with communities. So I actually went, thank fucking because then they're attached to the work. So I was glad. So that was a pivotal moment for me to realise and see, start to question the motives, the real motives, like come up with what. Now, I'm not suggesting there's anything definitely on the board, but it's a corporate entity. It is semi-state. There should be more community engagement. And that's when I started to champion people a lot more, and communities in particular, and rural communities that have been, like Tuntuska, for example, in Roscommon, like they are surrounded by peatland, and they have nothing else. And their whole, that's a Frank Hickey village as well, their whole economy was based around the bog, and now they're doing some tourism stuff. But they don't own it, so the Board of Monitor won't even let them out of them. Now they're trying to fence around bogs. I don't know how you put fences around all the bogs now, because, you know, maybe get Donald Trump or something. So I don't know. Yeah, it definitely changed work.
Even when you're talking about the community and there can be polarization, I know in Western where there's sort of gold mining and there's the company there, it's like that's trying to extract gold, they are kind of buying off bits of the community with funding, so we build a new pitch, so all the GAA people are kind of on board, and then it's you know, so that you can see where, you know, there's private money involved in it, it can be very kind of divisive and much more contentious, I suppose, when it's polarized that way.
This start was really refreshing to do that in nuance, being allowed to happen. I think that could be missing a lot from like environmental discussions. It's something that I'm based in Scotland at the minute, and something that I've noticed when I moved there. And it's not, obviously, can't generalise everyone, but one of the things I noticed was the countryside is seen as a place of leisure versus a place of work, which is what I think of it as. And I wonder, and I think those polarizing conversations you're talking about, they don't get brought up in the same way that they hopefully do here. And I wonder if that could be a strength, that those people, maybe in Ireland, are more likely to get brought along because there's more of them, and it's the relationships they have with land. There's more people that are going to take that into consideration, maybe, in other places.
Talking about the work I've done almost globally, there's very few landscapes where there isn't a stake held by people, and if they're not participated in giving true leadership of it, then they're often a victim of any solution or corporate greed or an agenda. So I think kind of hearing this, reflecting on the differences, like we're talking about Bogland or Loch Ness, they're both very Irish environmental stories that are very current and very contemporary, but there's such different nuances between the stakeholders and the map, literally, of it. I mean, the biggest map, everyone is involved in the land, that it suggests that nuance is the right approach, because that build has to be considered in a photography project or a cultural project to be successful.
Well, this gentleman's, your Loch Ness problem is obviously, it's the problem of the commons. isn't it? You know, the legend of the environmental legend of the commons, where everybody wants to put loads of sheep up on the village commons, and so, you know, the guy at the end of the day who wins out is the guy who won't take off his sheep at the end, because he can keep using it, you know what I mean, or he can keep putting on more. It's a kind of an environmental fable, you know, where the externalities aren't included in the cost. So that's obviously what's happened in Lough Neagh. But just to say that, like, from the point of view of the bogs, and probably even in Scotland, like, there's different land ownership patterns in Scotland. So I know they're all owned by big estates and things like that, aren't they? Whereas in Ireland, the bogs weren't really delineated on the maps actually until the early estate maps were done, and until they were considered to be a value. Then they started sort of ascribing ownership to them in the big estates here, but turbary rights were given. So, you know, there could be thousands of turbary rights on any given bog, which does mean there's that commons issue again that Shane's mentioning in his local bog, where there's 11 people, you know, and he starts saying there might be something different that we can do, but there's still 10 other people. And it is that collectivism, the collective decision as a society that we need to get to for an awful lot of these environmental issues. But it shouldn't still stop us doing the other bits. I mean, I'm trying to, I don't know how you would have photographed the horrible problem at Lough Neagh. Yeah.
Maybe it's not the ownership, but obviously in Lough Neagh there's some complication of the loch is owned by Lord.
Yeah, you know, and how are you going to get down off the bed? You're going to have to go down with the goggles, aren't you, and photograph the bed?
But then also at the same time, I've often advised and talked about Lough Neagh is the perfect media and photography story because it has obvious villains. One's just been mentioned. It also has climate change in this instance is actually producing something we can see that really irritates dog walkers who spend time on their hands, which is, you know, to be crass, is actually, from an environmental point of view, really useful as opposed to a hidden landscape of a small community. So in many ways, Lough Neagh is an intangibly massive story, but also the perfect story that I think photographers and arts and culture need to come at from lots of different angles because of where it fits in both Northern Irish identity, but also, correct me if I'm wrong, 60-odd% of freshwater, 70%. So it's an issue that doesn't just touch everybody, it makes up 60% of their metabolism. Yes, so it's an all-island issue as well. So I think Lough Neagh is a great story, but it's almost too big for, with respect, just one of you. There needs to be a multi-pronged approach. 5 more minutes. So, and there's a question here behind now.
Sorry, yeah, it's just, I find it interesting that something that appeared to be so positive for the people and for our culture and how kind of we went so wrong, and I look at kind of the whole environmental renewable energy and how it's promoted and funded as the be-all and end-all. And I see the work, we work very closely with Africa and a huge amount of the mines. A lot of the components for renewable energy is mined out of the ground and it's not renewable. So it's interesting, it's been, you know, fronted as this kind of, you know, self-propelling answer to the environmental crisis, and yet it is absolutely reliant on something that is not renewable from the earth. So it's interesting looking at your work and how that raises questions of something that we thought was so positive and ended up where it has, and how we can look at that internationally and see, you know, what learning can be taken from that. Or would they be willing to look at that?
Yeah, that tends to be, you know, that tends to be the problem when we look at, you know, at all the sushis, and we don't look at the full system. You know, we're not going right back to say, well, you know, you have to follow, it's a bit like following the money, isn't it? You have to follow each and every thing and follow where does that come from, what's the impact that that has. You do a full system analysis on it in order to come to a determination on it. So there's no point, as we say, exporting our problem to some, in a developing country. It's completely unfair and it goes against everything in a just transition, you know, that we would do that. And then ironically, I suppose the whole point about the original supply using the bogs was security of supply of fuel for electricity and heating and that warm home. And like everybody wants to have a warm home now because it's so bloody wet and cold and miserable, you know, so that's an emotional thing as well as everything else. So it goes right back to that hearth idea, and then the family around the hearth and the family praying around the hearth, and even, you know, the original way they counted houses in order to look at the hearths, how many hearths there were, you know, the hearth and money roads, you know, it's all back to that sense of warmth and security. you know? And I think that's the place-based thing in photography is much about that as well, isn't it? That rootedness and security. So I think a lot of the photography that could be made, you know, to say from my point of view about climate and biodiversity is that place-based stuff, because climate is so nebulous, it's just a way out there, it needs to be right down to the place. Where I see Trish.
I'm just wondering if artists are important agents for change and then they're making visible and they really do have, you know, affect our cultural shifts and thinking. What advice would you have for artists? Because there are ones like Creative Ireland, Creative Sport, you know, what advice would you give for artists to find a way to find experts to work? How can we get artists funded by the organisations who need images to affect change? Do you have any advice as to how do you know if you're working ethically? Where, how can we connect?
It would be good actually to sort of set up a kind of a, not a, what do you call it, like a dating, not a dating thing, but you know, the artists and the environmentalists having chats and working together. And then at least when you're putting your application into Creative Ireland or the local arts or whatever, that you're able to find a local site, you're able to find, if you want to do community-based practice, obviously. But if you don't, then at least you're on it from the point of view environmental stuff, that you know where to go. Because I think I've thought about this before, there is no kind of way of joining those two things up really effectively that would work really well for both sectors, because I know that as photographers and artists, you want to represent what's happening. You want to make a statement and a comment on contemporary issues, contemporary society, and we need that comment.
And we as spaces want to show it, and then we need someone to help to be ethical.
We need the comment, we really do, because if we don't have that comment provoking us and provoking the people that fund us, for example, like we now funded 50-50 government and EU, you know, and it's a €12 million project, like it's not a joke. You know, it's a lot of money, and you know, there's space in there for better cultural engagement and photography. You know, so there's a lot of projects, and there's going to be so much people and finance coming down into Ireland through private funding, and all of that needs to be better. You know, and you know, to provoke reactions and to document it or protest about it or whatever needs better work, more work, like yours.
I think one of the things that we're guilty of as arts organisations, and certainly not guilty of as artists because it's not in the remit, but I think could be, is evaluation evidence. Like a lot of the people that are making the decisions about where this funding is given want to see what I would call a theory of change or systems thinking, and they also want to see evidence that it can work and contribute to change, because actually a lot of the time their appetite for risk is not as healthy as it needs to be, so we can counter that by giving good demonstrable examples of projects or examples that's worked before. That's one of the things I think that we should do better in doing it. But those hands coming up at the exact point down to that. So, gentlemen here, Mr. Practitioner, yes, please.
Yeah, I want to ask about like the story of how many times some people's documented and really brought, you know, change, because like right now, maybe people see, you know, the Amazon's burning, and I was there like a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It's a very ongoing thing that, you know, people go there every year, they document the things happening. Everyone there in the community is aware of it. The government doesn't want to raise the alert, international alert. So it's not really changing, so like, it makes me think, so many people go to document, raise awareness, but how does it go beyond just awareness, you know? What's the change?
That's where I think the evaluation needs to come in, because it needs to go beyond reach or awareness for articles and goes into hearts and minds and behaviour change as well. And I also was once spent far too long in photojournalism circles, and you can rarely credit a single image or a single photographer or journalist that executed change, but then the cumulative mass of focus or awareness can produce change. So we want to have faith that their attention is part of the matrix of stuff that's making meaningful difference. Let's take the next question. Hi.
I also think cultural photographers have to make context for artists to work in, and I think that's really important. I think
a lot of times it's almost like cultural programs outsource. And I think Tony talked before about this idea of setting things in conversation. And I actually think that's where cultural institutions need to start to work, because I think artists can't do this work alone. And also artists then have to output the work in advance of conversation. And I think conversation, spaces for production, commissioning, all those things are the things that actually make art happen. So art happens in context, it happens in conversation, it happens in dialogue with institutions, it happens in curatorial support. It doesn't happen in a vacuum, it doesn't happen in a studio, it happens in relation to things. So that's what I think needs to happen. And I think that means that policy makers need to actually build in parts of their programs that initiate art and cultural programs. So I think there's a big responsibility on the curatorial as well in initiating things. And I think something that's happened in the Irish context is that there's a lot of work is outsourced to artists. So the artists put the program, they get the funding, they bring the work, but actually it needs to happen earlier.
Can we speak one more? Good. Any last one, otherwise I'll draw us in.
Going bigger, do you think programs like the Pre-Picting, which is an international prize in photography, has been going, 13 editions now? You know, Richard Moss has won it. Irish artists have been shortlisted for it. You know, it gets coverage all over the world. So does that make a difference? Is it a good model?
Well, I personally have seen those, images, and I think the way it goes with the theme and then the interpretation of the one-word theme, and then I think they're really strong images. But I mean, it would be really good if more people were able to access that or knew that that was there. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, yeah, because I think that the images on the pre-day are so strong, they're so full of everything that you couldn't be but moved by them, and they really give you like anytime I've seen the pre-picked images together here, for example, or in one of their books or whatever, the whole massing of all those images by the different artists says far more than a big long essay possibly would on the same subject, because you immediately can see the perspectives from all of those different artists in different countries. And it would be amazing, I think, to have more of that. I don't know how you distribute it, that more people would see it. But certainly that has a huge impact. And I think you can't not know what those images are trying to convey, even if you didn't see the theme, the thematic word.
I think I have probably personal criticisms of Pre-Pictet, but my major kind of sector celebration is the longevity and the risk that a massive financial institution is taking back in an art prize, given the current climate of how even 98% okay sponsors are getting smashed off art and culture. I'm not saying I want fossil fuels to support arts, but what I'm saying is the Pictet Bank, the bank called Pictet. But you know, we were having a discussion as a board meeting recently with representatives from the corporate sector, and good luck to any literary festival or any festival securing corporate sponsorship, because they enter a bit of social media. And that is a change in the landscape. So Pictet I celebrate because it is a global phenomenon and collection of work that is proving to be diverse and edgy, and high net worth influencing individuals are drinking champagne to it, but they are talking about the right things.
We just got EU funding because it's been on our agenda to address climate action, but we need money to pay. If you're disaster arts grants, you know, and your bills are going up, getting money to commission your work is really difficult. So we're lucky that we've just got funding for a big 4-partner European project on climate action. So that'll be announced in November, and there will be opportunity to commission new work and support that work. And it's vital. That's the thing, the money to pay our long-term engagement.
I think it's just a big conversation as well.
Yeah.
Because there is art funding now, but it's just that sometimes, I suppose, it's just finding those joints. It's not a criticism.
No, but it should be a criticism. We need to do more. We also,
but I know we're all limited.
Yeah.
I think that it's just really good that there's more. I just think there needs to be more commissioning requirements. Yeah. Because there is actually quite a lot of art funding. Just
make it effective.
Yeah, and it's about competence. A lot of
Final note of optimism, well, maybe not from the state, but philanthropically, there's been more money dispensed around climate change and public art this year than it has for the last 6 years. So those two particular bits are on the rise. I'd love to know a little bit more how I can get some stuff. So it is on the up. And I'm going to close this out. I want to say, as an organisation, as part of the Irish Photo Network, I want to call out Darren and Trish for doing so much of the legwork and hosting this here today. Thank you so much for that. I do believe this is recorded, so if you thought that anyone who couldn't make it here to Dublin who wants to see this, do get the link out. But also then thank you to Shane and Shirley for making this a slightly unknown but a really easy little topic for me to discuss with them. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome to the garden.
Thanks to all our speakers and thanks to Belfast Exposed and Source Magazine.